My fiancée cheated, then insisted I still cover her girl's trip, claiming saying no was controlling. I shut off the money and stepped away, and she broke down in front of the same friend she'd been flexing her freedom to. I was 3 weeks from marrying this woman. I had the ring. I had the venue. I had the suit. I had a savings account I'd been building for 2 years to give us a good start. And she had a secret, a Venmo request, and the audacity to call me controlling for not funding her lifestyle after she detonated the relationship it was built on. This is going to be a hard story to tell. Not because it's complicated, because it's simple. And simple truths are the ones that cut deepest. My name is Mason Calloway. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I almost married a woman who was sleeping with someone else, paying for her social life with my credit cards, and building a narrative about me being the villain months before I even knew there was a plot. Brielle Sutton walked into my life at a friend's birthday party 4 years ago. She was wearing a green dress and laughing at something someone said, and when she turned and saw me, she smiled like she'd been waiting for me to show up. That's how it felt. Like a rival. Like the room had been holding a space, and I just filled it. I know how that sounds now. I know it sounds like the opening of every story that ends badly. But at the time, it didn't feel like foreshadowing. It felt like beginning. We dated for 3 years. Got engaged on a Tuesday evening in our apartment because Brielle said she didn't want a public proposal. She wanted a private moment. Just us. Something real. I bought the ring 6 months before I asked. Hid it in a toolbox in the garage because she'd never looked there. Got down on one knee between the couch and the coffee table while she was in pajamas eating leftover pad thai. And she said yes before I finished the sentence. We laughed. We cried. We called our families. It was the best night of my life. And everything I believed about it was true except the person I was sharing it with. I need to tell you about the money because the money is the engine of this story. Without the money, the rest of it is just a breakup. With the money, it's an education. I'm a project manager for a civil engineering firm. I make $112,000 a year. I'm careful with it. Not cheap. Careful. I budget. I save. I invest in index funds and keep an emergency account that I never touch. I don't buy things I can't afford, and I don't pretend to be wealthier than I am. What I do is provide. And for 4 years, providing for Brielle was something I did gladly because I thought we were building a life, and building a life costs money, and I had more of it than she did. Brielle worked in social media marketing. Freelance. Her income was inconsistent. Some months $3,000, some months $800, some months nothing. She was talented but undisciplined, picking up clients and dropping them when the work got tedious, chasing the next creative project the way some people chase highs. I didn't judge her for it. I covered the gap. Rent was mine. Car payment was mine. Insurance, phone, groceries, utilities, all mine. She contributed when she could, and when she couldn't, I absorbed the difference without comment because that's what partners do. Or that's what I thought partners do. Turns out, what partners do and what sponsors do are different things, and I was the second one wearing the costume of the first. The monthly total, once I added it up afterward, approximately $4,200 a month in expenses I covered that should have been shared. Over 4 years, that's north of $200,000. I didn't calculate that number until after. During the relationship, it was just life. Just us. Just building. Then there was the wedding fund. A savings account I opened when we got engaged. I deposited $1,500 a month for 18 months. $27,000, earmarked for the venue, the caterer, the photographer, the flowers, the honeymoon. My money, my deposits, our dream. Or so I thought. Now let me tell you about the friend group. Because this story has a chorus, and the chorus was singing backup on every lie. Brielle had 4 close friends. Janelle Rowan, Morgan Peak, Kira Delgado, and Sloan Barrett. They operated like a unit. Group chat active around the clock. Brunch every Saturday at a place called Lemon Tree that charged $19 for eggs and unlimited mimosas. Coordinated social media posts. Matching vacation aesthetics. They called themselves The Circle without irony, which should have been my first red flag, but I was too in love to read the colors. What I didn't know, and what I would discover in the wreckage, was that I was funding The Circle. Brielle didn't just pay for herself at brunch. She often covered the table. She bought rounds. She paid for Ubers. She put girls' dinners on my card, girls' nights on my card, concert tickets, spa days, the kind of generous social spending that looks like friendship from the outside and looks like embezzlement from the inside when you realize the account it's coming from belongs to someone who wasn't invited. The girls' trip to Miami was the crown jewel. Annual tradition. 4 days, 5 nights. Airbnb on South Beach. Flights, restaurants, clubs, shopping. Brielle booked it every year, and every year, the booking went on my credit card. I knew about the trips. I approved the spending, more or less, because she framed it as self-care and I believed in supporting her happiness. What I didn't know was the scale. The Miami trips were running $5,000 to $7,000 annually, and Brielle was covering costs for friends who conveniently never Venmo'd her back. I was the silent investor in a social life I was not part of. The invisible man behind the velvet rope, paying the cover charge for a club I was never invited into. Janelle told me later that the group used to joke about it. Not cruelly, she said, but casually, which is worse. Brielle's got it was the standard phrase when the check came. Brielle's got it meant Mason has got it. And nobody at that table ever asked where the money came from, because asking would have disrupted the fantasy that their friend was independently generous rather than dependently funded. The total, once I added up the statements, over 4 years, Brielle spent approximately $22,000 on group social expenses. Brunches, dinners, concerts, spa days, bottle service, the annual Miami trip. $22,000 of my money, spent on women who would later call me controlling for saying no to one more vacation. Funding bottle service I'd never drink. Paying for Airbnbs I'd never sleep in. Financing the aesthetic of independence for a group of women who would later call me controlling for cutting off the supply. Now, the cheating. Cole Brannon is my best friend. Has been since college. Loyalty that doesn't announce itself, just shows up. Cole was at a restaurant downtown on a Thursday evening, sitting at the bar, waiting for a date who was running late. He looked across the room and saw Brielle at a corner booth with a man he didn't recognize. Not sitting across from each other. Next to each other. Close. His arm around her. Her head tilted toward him. The body language of two people who are not meeting for the first time. Cole didn't take a photo. Didn't confront her. He called me from the parking lot. Mason, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you react. He told me. I reacted anyway. Not outwardly. Internally. The kind of reaction that happens behind the ribs. The tectonic shift of a man's understanding of his own life rearranging itself around a single new fact. I confronted Brielle that night. She was on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through the group chat that I would later learn contained evidence of everything. I sat across from her and said, Cole saw you at Marcelo's tonight. With someone. The sequence that followed was textbook. Deny, minimize, redirect. It was just a friend from the gym. Cole said his arm was around you. He's a touchy person. It's just how he is. Brielle. Silence. Then the pivot. The tears. The minimization repackaged as confession. Okay. We kissed. Once. It was stupid. It meant nothing. I was stressed about the wedding, and I made a mistake. A kiss. One kiss. Stressed about the wedding. I almost accepted it. Almost let the explanation land because the alternative was worse, and accepting a small lie is easier than excavating a large one. But something in her delivery was off. The tears were too fast. The apology too rehearsed. She'd had the response loaded before I asked the question, which meant she'd practiced it, which meant she'd anticipated being caught, which meant the thing she was caught doing had been going on long enough to require a contingency plan. I pressed. Over the next 48 hours, the truth came out in layers, each one peeled back with the reluctance of someone who will only admit what they think you already know. It wasn't a kiss. It was a full physical relationship. It wasn't one night. It was 3 months. It wasn't a stranger from the gym. His name was Tyler Gage. He was a personal trainer who lived with 2 roommates in a 1-bedroom apartment he couldn't afford alone, drove a car with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months, and had the financial stability of a paper boat in a rainstorm. Tyler Gage, 28 years old, personal trainer at a gym called Iron Republic that charges $40 a month and has equipment from 2011. He lived with 2 roommates in a 1-bedroom, which means someone was sleeping in the living room, and I am going to guess it was not Tyler, because Tyler had the kind of confidence that claims the bedroom regardless of whose name is on the lease. His car was a 12-year-old Nissan with a check engine light that had been on so long, it was basically a feature. His Instagram, which I looked at once and once was enough, was a grid of shirtless mirror selfies and motivational quotes attributed to people who never said them. She was not trading up. She wasn't leaving me for someone better. She was keeping the excitement on the side and the funding at home. Tyler provided the thrill. I provided the life. And she needed both because one without the other was either boring or broke. That realization is the one that rewired me. Not the cheating itself, painful as it was. The architecture of it. She had designed a dual system. One man for the emotional high, one man for the financial infrastructure, and neither knew about the other. I was the utility she plugged into. Tyler was the entertainment she streamed on top. And the subscription was my credit card. 2 days after the confession, before we'd had any real conversation about the future, before I'd decided anything, before the wreckage had even been surveyed, my phone buzzed. Venmo. Brielle Sutton requesting $2,400. Note, for Miami. Don't make this weird. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words meant something different. The first time, disbelief. The second time, clarity. The third time, the cold, clean anger of a man who has just been handed the proof that the person he loved sees him as an ATM with a heartbeat. $2,400. For a beach vacation. Requested by the woman who'd been sleeping with someone else for 3 months. 2 days after the confession that wasn't even complete yet. Don't make this weird. As if the weirdness was my potential refusal and not her spectacular betrayal. I said no. Not with explanation. Not with emotion. Just, no. The response came in under a minute. Seriously? The flights are booked. The Airbnb is booked. Everything is on your card. You can't just cancel on me. I'm not canceling on you. I'm declining to fund a vacation for a woman who's been cheating on me for 3 months. And then the word. The one she'd been loading into the chamber for longer than I knew. This is exactly why I needed space. You're so controlling with money. You always have been. This is financial abuse, Mason. Controlling. Financial abuse. From the woman whose rent I paid. Whose car I insured. Whose phone was on my plan. Whose friends drank on my tab. Whose affair partner drove a car with a broken check engine light, while she lived in an apartment she couldn't afford alone for a single month. I was controlling. For saying no. Once. To a vacation. After being cheated on. And here's the twist that turned the knife sideways. She'd been building this narrative for months. Janelle told me later, after everything collapsed, after she became the one friend with enough conscience to break ranks. Brielle had been telling the circle for at least 6 months that I was controlling with money. Not after the cheating. Before it. Long before. She was seeding the story while the affair was in its early stages, planting the framework so that when things detonated, her version was already installed. The friends already believed I was the problem. They already saw her as a woman trapped in a financially controlling relationship. By the time the cheating surfaced, the narrative was so deeply rooted that her friends didn't see a cheater. They saw a woman who'd finally found freedom from a man who used money as control. Premeditated. Not just the affair. The reputation management. She didn't stumble into calling me controlling. She engineered a public perception campaign months in advance, turning the people closest to her into character witnesses for a defense she hadn't needed yet, but knew she eventually would. That level of planning doesn't come from a woman who made a mistake because she was stressed. It comes from a woman who was building an exit strategy while sleeping under a roof I paid for. I didn't argue with the controlling accusation. I didn't defend myself to her or her friends. I did what I should have done the moment Cole called me from the parking lot. I opened my laptop. Sat at the desk I had bought for our shared apartment, the desk where I had worked late nights to earn the money that funded everything she touched. And I started dismantling, not with anger, with precision. The same precision I apply to project timelines and budget forecasts at work. Because this was a risk assessment. The risk was continuing to fund a person who had demonstrated that my money and my trust were commodities she consumed without reciprocation. The mitigation strategy was simple: cut every line. The process took one evening. Noelle Arden, the woman who would later become the best thing in my life, once told me that the fastest way to understand a relationship is to look at who pays for what. That night, sitting at my desk with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink, I looked at what I was paying for and understood, fully, for the first time, the financial architecture of my exploitation. Credit cards. Brielle was an authorized user on 2 of my cards. Total balance she'd accumulated, $14,000. Canceled. Both cards. New ones issued in my name only. Phone plan. She'd been on my account for 3 years. Removed. Car insurance, bundled with mine for the discount. Removed. Her policy would lapse in 30 days. Streaming accounts, for services, all in my name, all shared with her and, by extension, the circle. Cancelled. The Airbnb for Miami, booked on my card. Cancelled. Refund processed to my account. The wedding savings, the account I'd been building for 18 months. I checked the balance. It should have been $27,000. It was $19,000. $8,000 missing. I pulled the transaction history and found what I expected and still wasn't ready for. Small withdrawals, 200 here, 300 there, over the last 8 months. Clothing stores. A spa. A jewelry purchase that didn't match anything she'd given me. A men's cologne from a department store, purchased 2 months into the affair, which meant she was buying gifts for Tyler Gage with money from the account I'd built for our wedding. $8,000. I scrolled through the transactions one by one. March 14th, $340, Nordstrom. March 22nd, $180, a spa in the Arts District. April 3rd, $275, a jewelry store I had never heard of. April 19th, $95, a department store fragrance counter, the cologne for Tyler. May 8th, for $120, a boutique that sells the kind of clothes you wear when you are trying to impress someone new with a body someone old is paying to maintain. Each withdrawal was small enough to avoid triggering an alert. Each one was calculated to stay below the threshold of my attention. She had been siphoning from the wedding fund the way a parasite feeds, slowly, carefully, never taking enough to kill the host, just enough to sustain the life growing inside it that the host does not know about. $8,000. Drained from a wedding fund. To finance an affair and a lifestyle and gifts for a man who lived with 2 roommates and couldn't fix his own check engine light. I closed the account, transferred the remaining $19,000 to my personal savings, and I sat in the dark for a very long time. The girls' trip was scheduled for that Friday, 3 days after the shutdown. Brielle didn't know yet. She knew I'd said no to the Venmo request, but she assumed the bookings were still intact because they were on my card and I hadn't explicitly said I'd canceled them. She assumed, the way she'd assumed everything in our relationship, that the infrastructure would hold regardless of what she did to the person maintaining it. Friday morning. I know what happened at the airport because Janelle told me. In detail, with the kind of precision that comes from someone who watched a spectacle unfold and understood, in real time, that they were witnessing the end of something. The 4 of them arrived at the terminal. Matching luggage tags. Coordinated outfits. The curated aesthetic of women who perform friendship the way influencers perform authenticity, with effort disguised as effortlessness. Brielle was leading. She always led. The alpha of the circle, the one who organized and financed and directed, except the financing was mine and the directing was about to hit a wall. Check-in counter. Luggage fee. Card declined. Brielle tried again. Declined. Tried a different card, the second one. Declined. She pulled out her personal debit card, the one attached to an account that contained approximately $300 because Brielle Sutton's personal financial life was a desert that my money irrigated. Declined. She stepped out of line. Tried to pull up the Airbnb reservation on her phone. Cancelled. Refund processed. The listing was gone. 5 nights on South Beach, the anchor of the entire trip, the thing the matching luggage tags were supposed to arrive at, deleted from her account by a man sitting in a dark apartment 300 miles away. Brielle's face, according to Janelle, went through a transformation that took about 15 seconds and covered approximately 4 years of emotional territory. Confusion, realization, panic, and then the thing that Janelle described as the most honest moment she'd ever seen from Brielle Sutton. Collapse. Not physical, emotional. The dissolution of a persona that had been maintained by money that was never hers, in front of an audience she'd been performing for, in an airport terminal where the acoustics carry and the strangers notice. Janelle said Brielle stood there for maybe 30 seconds, phone in hand, staring at the canceled reservation the way you stare at a door that is just closed and locked from the other side. Then she sat down on her suitcase, right there in the terminal, in front of travelers and TSA agents and a family eating Cinnabons 3 gates away, and she cried. Not the curated tears she had used during the confession, the ones that arrive on cue and serve a strategic purpose. Real tears. The kind that come when the floor disappears and you realize you've been standing on someone else's foundation the whole time, and they just pulled it. The friends watched. Morgan and Kira tried to help, offering to cover costs, pulling out their own cards, the cards that had never been the primary ones because Brielle always paid, which meant I always paid. Sloane stood to the side, arms crossed, the expression of someone doing math she should have done a long time ago. And Janelle watched the whole thing with the growing understanding that the lifestyle they'd been enjoying was never Brielle's. It was mine, and it had been revoked. The trip didn't happen. Couldn't happen. For women with matching luggage and nowhere to go, standing in an airport terminal, watching the social architecture of their group dissolve in real time because the invisible man behind the curtain had finally stepped away from the machine. Janelle contacted me 2 days later. Not to defend Brielle. To confess. I need to show you something, and I need you to know that I'm showing you because I can't carry it anymore. She sent me screenshots. The group chat. Months of messages. Brielle talking about me. He's so controlling. He monitors everything I spend. I feel trapped. Messages from 6 months ago, long before the cheating was discovered, building the narrative brick by brick. The friends responding with encouragement. You deserve better. That's not normal. You need to get out. They were coaching her to leave me while I was paying for their bottomless mimosas. But Janelle also sent the messages from after the airport. Brielle crying in the chat. The friends dividing. Morgan and Kira offering sympathy, but also distance. The careful withdrawal of people who realize the brand they've been associated with has become toxic. Sloane going quiet entirely. And Brielle, in one message that Janelle screenshotted with a red circle around it, typing the sentence that confirmed everything I'd suspected. He was supposed to keep paying. That was the deal. I read that message 4 times. Each time it said the same thing, and each time it meant something worse. He was supposed to keep paying. Not he was supposed to forgive me. Not he was supposed to give us another chance. He was supposed to keep paying. The deal. Our 4-year relationship, distilled by the person I almost married into a financial arrangement with a continuation clause that survived infidelity. I was not a fiancé. I was a subscription she assumed would auto-renew regardless of the service she provided. He was supposed to keep paying. That was the deal. Not he was supposed to love me. Not he was supposed to forgive me. He was supposed to keep paying. The deal. As if our relationship was a contract and the only clause that mattered was the financial one. As if the cheating was a personal matter and the money was a professional obligation. As if I was a utility provider and my service agreement survived the customer's betrayal. There was one more thing. While packing Brielle's things from the apartment, her stuff boxed and labeled in the living room like a departure lounge, I found it in the bottom of her nightstand drawer. A second phone. Prepaid. Burner. The kind you buy at a drugstore for $40 with cash, so there's no record. The text history was minimal because she'd been deleting conversations regularly. But the contact list had one name. Tyler Gage. And the call log showed 3 months of daily communication, sometimes multiple calls a day, with timestamps that mapped perfectly onto the moments I thought she was in the shower, or on a work call, or at brunch with the circle. The affair wasn't just hidden in deleted texts on her main phone. It was compartmentalized into a separate device. A second phone, purchased deliberately, maintained carefully, hidden in a drawer 6 inches from where I slept every night. The premeditation wasn't impulsive. It was operational. She ran the affair like a project, with dedicated hardware and a communication protocol and a cover story maintained by a network of friends who knew the passcode. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the phone and tried to calculate how many nights I had slept 6 inches from a device that contained proof of everything she was hiding. How many times she had reached into that drawer while I was in the shower or asleep or making the breakfast she ate before texting the man she was sleeping with. How many mornings I kissed her goodbye and walked to my car while the burner phone sat in the dark, holding conversations I was never meant to see, in a drawer I was never meant to open, in a life I was never fully included in. I put the phone on the kitchen counter. Didn't touch it again. Let her find it there when she came to collect her boxes. The wedding was canceled. I contacted every vendor. The venue returned 60% of the deposit. The caterer returned nothing. The photographer, a woman named Luz who'd been lovely throughout the planning process, sent me a message. I'm sorry, Mason. No charge for the engagement photos. Consider them a gift. You'll find someone who deserves what's in front of the camera. I kept that message. Denise Sutton called me on a Wednesday evening, 2 weeks after everything. Brielle's mother. I almost didn't answer because I assumed it was an extension of the campaign. Another voice in the chorus telling me I was wrong. It wasn't. Mason, it's Denise. I'm not calling to defend my daughter. I'm calling to apologize. I sat down. Because a mother apologizing for her adult child is not something you receive standing up. I saw the signs. Over the past year. The new phone she tried to hide. The stories that didn't add up. The way she talked about you. The controlling stuff. I knew something was wrong. And I didn't say anything because I told myself it wasn't my place and she was an adult and maybe I was reading it wrong. I wasn't reading it wrong. And I'm ashamed that I didn't call her on it before it got here. Thank you, Denise. That means more than you know. You were good to her, Mason. Better than she deserved. And what she did, the cheating, the money, the way she framed you to her friends, that's not who I raised her to be. But it is who she chose to become. And I'm sorry you were the one who paid for it. In every sense of the word. She cried. Briefly. The kind of tears that come from a mother who is not defending her child, but mourning the version of her child she thought existed. There is a specific grief in that. The grief of a parent who realizes the person they raised made choices the raising should have prevented. Then composed herself with the dignity of a woman who raised a daughter she loved and was now confronting the distance between the child she raised and the adult that child became. That call was the only moment of closure the Sutton family offered me. It was enough. Brielle tried to contact me for 3 weeks after the breakup. The messages followed the predictable cycle. Anger first. You ruined the trip. You humiliated me. Then bargaining. Can we talk? I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Then guilt. For years and you just throw it away? You never really loved me. Then, when none of those worked, the final attempt, a voicemail left at 2 a.m. that I listened to once and deleted. I'm sorry, Mason. I'm really, truly sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. She didn't mean for any of this to happen. The 3-month affair she maintained on a burner phone. The narrative campaign she built over 6 months. The $8,000 she drained from a wedding fund. The friends she trained to see me as the villain. None of it was supposed to happen. It just happened. Accidentally. Over and over. With planning and hardware and a contact saved as T. I didn't respond. Not once. Not to the anger, the bargaining, the guilt, or the 2 a.m. voicemail. Silence was the most honest thing I could offer, because silence is the sound a relationship makes when there's nothing left to fund. Cole took me fishing 3 weeks after the breakup. Not because I like fishing, because Cole knows that sometimes a man needs to sit next to another man and look at water and not talk about anything until the quiet has done its work. We sat on a dock for 4 hours. Caught nothing. Said almost nothing. At some point, Cole looked at the water and said, "You know what the difference is between a loss and a lesson?" What? A loss is something that was taken from you. A lesson is something you took from the situation. The money's a loss. The time's a loss. But knowing what you know now, about her, about yourself, about what you're willing to accept, that's a lesson. And lessons appreciate. Losses depreciate. I thought about that for a long time. Sitting on that dock with the sun going down and the water moving forward without asking permission. Losses depreciate. Lessons appreciate. The $200,000 I spent on a relationship that was half real and half performance, that is a loss. The knowledge that I will never again confuse providing with partnering, that I will never again hand someone the keys to my financial life without a prenup and a spreadsheet and the willingness to audit, that is a lesson. And the lesson, compounded over the decades I have left, will be worth more than any amount Brielle ever charged to my card. Cole Brannon, everybody. Philosophy delivered from a dock with a fishing rod and a beer. The man is a poet who thinks he's just a guy who shows up. 6 months have passed. I'm in a different apartment now. Smaller. Mine. No authorized users on my credit cards. No shared streaming accounts. No second phone in any drawer. The savings account is rebuilding. Not as fast as I'd like, but faster than I expected, because it turns out that when you stop funding someone else's double life, the math improves considerably. I don't hate Brielle. Hate requires energy I've redirected toward better things. What I feel for her is the specific numbness you develop for a chapter that's over, not warm, not cold, just closed. She exists in a part of my memory that I've filed under expensive education, and I don't open the folder unless someone asks. The circle dissolved. Not with drama, with arithmetic. Without my money flowing through Brielle to the group, the brunches got less frequent, the trips stopped, the group chat went quiet. It turns out that the circle was less a friendship and more a financial ecosystem, and when the funding was removed, the ecosystem couldn't sustain itself. Janelle is the only one who remained in contact with me, not because she chose sides, but because she chose honesty, and honesty sometimes lands you on the side that everyone else left. Last week, I was sitting at my desk, savings account open on the screen. The number was climbing. Not dramatically, steadily. The way a savings account grows when the only person spending from it is the person who earned it. I looked at the number and felt something I hadn't felt in 4 years of funding a relationship that was never fully mine. Margin. Financial margin. Emotional margin. The space between what I earn and what I owe, occupied entirely by my own future. No Venmo requests. No group chat expenses. No wedding fund hemorrhaging into someone else's wardrobe. No burner phone bills. No Miami. No Brielle. Just a man, his money, and a savings account that answers to nobody. She sent me one last text, 2 months ago. Short. I hope you're okay, Mason. I really am sorry. I read it. Didn't respond. Set the phone down. And went back to the spreadsheet. Some numbers don't need a reply. They just need to stop being read. Mine are finally black. And they are staying that way. Brielle Sutton taught me something in 4 years that no business school could teach in 40. She taught me the difference between investing and spending. Investing is putting money into something that grows, that builds, that returns more than it takes. Spending is putting money into something that consumes, that performs, that looks like growth but produces nothing except the illusion of it. For 4 years I thought I was investing in a partnership. I was spending on a performance. The ring, the venue, the savings account, the monthly transfers, the credit cards, the phone plan, the car insurance, the Miami trips, the brunches, the bottle service, the cologne for a man named Tyler who could not afford his own check engine light repair, but could apparently afford to sleep with a woman whose entire life was subsidized by someone else. That is not a relationship. That is a production. And the production has closed. The theater is dark. The audience has gone home. And the man who funded every ticket, every set piece, every costume change, is sitting in his own apartment, in his own chair, looking at his own numbers, in his own silence. And the silence, for the first time in 4 years, is not the sound of something missing. It is the sound of something finally mine.